Welcome to the BetterPears Podcast. Join Dr. Jason Fujikawa for his insights on theology, philosophy, culture, and the verbal expressions we use to relate meaning and reality to one another. Make no mistake, this is a podcast for nerds, but particular nerds who are searching for old wisdom made ever new. To learn more about the BetterPears cultural empire, please visit betterpears.com. Hello, I'm Dr. Jason Fujikawa. Before we get into the episode this week on vaccination, I would like to thank you, our audience, for continuing to listen each week. If you enjoy the BetterPears podcast, could you please like and subscribe to the podcast on your platform of choice? To receive the transcript of each episode and to be the first to learn of BetterPears announcements, please sign up to our newsletter at the bottom of the page at betterpears.com. On the in-person courses front, we hope to have a big announcement next week, as much is being developed behind the scenes to make our in-person events in the Oklahoma City metro area a new highlight of your week. I can announce now that the in-person sessions coming to Oklahoma City in the coming weeks will be part of our BetterPears Greenhouse Courses, which maintain our focus on reading classical texts in their original language, and in this case, English. So, if you have been on the fence about attending a BetterPears course because Latin and Ancient Greek were lingua incognita, our Greenhouse courses were designed with you in mind. This is just another reason to sign up for our newsletter so that you can know when our limited registration window opens. Finally, the BetterPears podcast is offered free through the wonder of the internet, but made possible through the continued contributions of our listener audience. Please consider a monthly contribution for as little as $10 per month, or a one-time contribution of whatever you can responsibly afford. Thank you for your continued patronage of attention and Federal Reserve notes. And now, on with the episode. Season 2, Episode 4, Vaccination. There was a time not so long ago when the term vaccination was not on the short list of contentious matters which would get a social media influencer canceled. While I hope to eschew the designation influencer for as long as possible, and do not ascribe to give medical advice, I'm not that kind of doctor. The topic for this episode will nevertheless be vaccination. The term has as its origin an observation by Dr. Edward Jenner, who in 1796 noticed that people infected with the rather mild cowpox were immune to the more severe and potentially deadly smallpox. After exposing a patient to cowpox and allowing symptoms to subside after a few days, the patient proved resistant to subsequent exposures to smallpox. This process of inoculation was termed vaccination, after the Latin word vacca, meaning cow. Vaccination, by extension, is a certain cow-likening, giving rise to terms such as herd immunity. The biological function for conventional vaccination is rooted in the introduction of dead, mild, or otherwise weakened cells of a disease. The autoimmune system of the receiving human host is triggered by these strawman pathogens and develops corresponding antibodies to combat the pathogen when encountered in its healthy, virulent form. The whole process resembles the gathering of military intelligence to minimize the effect of a future attack. Beyond the military, the Church, and here I refer to the Catholic Church on account of its historical perdurance and magisterial structure, the Church allows sinners into her midst. Being a sinner is the closest thing we have to a prerequisite for membership, with the exception of Jesus, Mary, and the angels. These sinners often have errant and destructive views of the faith, and yet the Church throughout every century has responded to these errors and those who held them with an aim to healing both the Church as the united body of Christ and the individual. Of relevance here is the reality that doctrinal statements often follow in the wake of the errors and heresies that they address, much like the body responds to the pathogenic material in a vaccination. Thus, the rhythm of conventional vaccinations seems to resonate in the body with the similar social response to ideological pathogens, that is, introduction, identification, response, and restoration. More novel vaccination methods now in common use seem to subvert this rhythm of our autoimmune system and modify the ribonucleic acid, RNA, or protein structures that order all our bodily cells and their operations. The whole situation seems to be a physiological playing out of what Friedrich Nietzsche describes in his Vom Nutzen und Nachteil der Historie für das Leben, sometimes translated as the use and abuse of history for life. The philosophic work is modern in two senses. It takes man as the measure of all things instead of God. And it is short and to the point, ready-made for mass consumption. In his Use and Abuse, Nietzsche introduces the unhistorical man, sometimes called the last man. The description given is in comparison to the grazing cow, which fills its belly looking down at a truncated horizon of history. The unhistorical man's concern is the satiation of his belly and the avoidance of pain, in which we can discern the recent mantra of our age, safety first. As a foil to the last man are the historical man and the superhistorical man. The distinction is somewhat unclear in Nietzsche's writing, as he lists three approaches to history: monumental, antiquarian, and critical. The last approach, critical history, however, seems more aligned with what he describes as superhistorical, and the person engaging in critical history, what he will refer to in a later work as the Übermensch, or Superman. As for the two historical approaches, monumental and antiquarian, Nietzsche offers some significant nuance. Monumental history focuses on the great deeds of the past, with a hope of a return to that past greatness. Monumental history is limited by analysis paralysis. Life and action, for Nietzsche, requires a suspension of history to live in the unhistorical or superhistorical now. For example, one does not become Alexander the Great by thinking too much about becoming great. Indeed, it appears Alexander's greatest military victory displays a certain disregard for his personal safety, and his success as a conqueror was completely void of a succession plan, as if his eventual death was never considered. Alternatively, antiquarian history for Nietzsche is less selective of the high points of the past and seeks to take in a wider view of the past than simply the high points or monuments. The danger to life, according to Nietzsche's understanding of life, is that the antiquarian has too much reverence for the past and no discerning taste of what is best or even comparatively better. Our modern example would be moral or cultural relativism, holding that all past principles and customs are of equal merit and worth. In earlier times, these two kinds of historical men informed the unhistorical, unreflective last man with purpose, exemplars, and the virtues of self-denial, or at least delayed gratification. What tends to replace these historical approaches in Nietzsche's paradigm is the critical historian, who wields both a destructive and constructive nihilism before the unhistorical man. Although translated for our audience, the root crit in critical is derived from the Greek adjective kratos, meaning might or strength, and accurately denotes the nihilistic will to power of this superhistorical approach. This nihilism is certainly destructive, as one could expect, extirpating ancient mores and principles recalled by monumental and antiquarian history alike. It is also constructive and creative in the strong sense, the sense in which the creating creature both blasphemes and negates the blasphemy by negating God. From the rubble of the fallen world, the Nietzschean Superman wills into being his own order and age, but he does so dispassionately, a martyr in his own eyes to an enduring cause of his own will projected upon the herd of unhistorical men, who are still chewing cud, their bread in circuses, no matter if ancient or modern. Like his Superman, Nietzsche seems dispassionate as well in his exposition of these historical approaches. Although he sees critical history as most able to harness life through the will to power, he finds no need to democratize, that is, universalize it or even defend it. Critical history simply is the case of the world, so far as critical history is able to reshape the world. A reflective pause is necessary. In a world, or rather a view of the world that eclipses God, the landscape grows cold and dark quickly. Our visceral response as participants in what we consider a liberal democracy is to strike out against the Superman, the tyrant, the demagogues, the oligarchs who spell the word few backwards. Even if successful, this Superman will be replaced after a time. The harder response, the response that voids the power of critical history, is the humble history that inquires into the past not as its master, but as its ward and successor. The rejection of the critical history of nihilism in our market squares and mental horizons is not to topple the Superman, but to cease to become the last man, the cow living in the now and for the now, without history or intending future greatness. Regardless of the convalescence or malevolence to the body of conventional or modern vaccinations, this ideological vaccination against history and its genuine fruition breeds death to the human soul. The views expressed by BetterPears contributors are theirs alone, and do not necessarily reflect the views of BetterPears, its parent company, or any company or organization affiliated with the contributors. For more information, to support BetterPears, or to shop for BetterPears merchandise, please visit betterpears.com.